The steam from the coffee machine clouded the mirror in the employee bathroom as Mai wiped away the tiredness from her eyes. It was only 2 p.m., and she still had 8 more hours to go on her double shift at Golden Plate, one of downtown's fanciest restaurants. The dark circles under her eyes told the story of countless such days, but her mother's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves. Table 12 is asking for you again. Her coworker Lee called from outside. They're saying their steaks aren't cooked right. Mai took a deep breath, straightened her black apron, and pushed back her shoulders. She knew exactly who was at table 12. The same group of business people who found something wrong with their order every single time they visited. Walking through the bustling kitchen, she grabbed a fresh pot of coffee, knowing they'd demand that next. The restaurant buzzed with the typical afternoon crowd. Lawyers in designer suits, tech executives with their expensive watches, and business people closing deals over $200 bottles of wine. 5 years ago, Mai had dreamed of being one of them. Her business degree from the state university was supposed to be her ticket to the corporate world. But then the recession hit, and life had other plans. "Excuse me," she said softly, approaching table 12 with a practiced smile. "I heard there might be an issue with your steaks." The woman at the head of the table barely looked up from her phone, waving her hand dismissively. "This is medium well. I specifically asked for medium. Don't they teach you the difference in waitress school?" A few others at the table snickered, but Mai maintained her composure. "I'll have the kitchen prepare new ones right away," she replied, collecting their plates. As she turned, she heard one of them whisper, "Can't even get a simple order right. This is why some people will always be serving others." In the kitchen, Chef Wong saw her face and immediately understood. He'd been watching her handle difficult customers for months now, never losing her cool. "Hey kid," he called out, already firing up fresh steaks. "You're worth 10 of them, you know that." May gave him a grateful smile as she loaded more plates onto her tray for her other tables. The rest of the afternoon flowed like a carefully choreographed dance, refilling water glasses, taking orders, carrying heavy trays, and always smiling. Her regulars at table 7, an elderly couple who came in every Thursday, brightened her day by asking about her mother's health. They remembered how she'd mentioned taking this job to help with the medical bills, and they always tipped generously, insisting she put it toward her mom's care. Between rushes, Mai would steal moments to jot down ideas in her worn notebook. Business concepts, market analyses, and dreams she wasn't ready to give up on yet. Her coworkers teased her good-naturedly about her secret diary, but she didn't mind. While her hands carried plates and poured coffee, her mind was always working, observing, learning from the business conversations happening around her. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the restaurant's tall windows, Mi's feet ached in her sensible black shoes. But when a young girl at one of her tables pointed at her and said, "Mom, I want to be like her when I grow up. She's so nice," Mai felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the kitchen's heat. The girl's mother looked embarrassed, probably thinking her daughter should aim higher. But Mi knelt down and told the little girl, "Sweetheart, you can be anything you want to be, and being kind to others is the best start." The day would end like all others, counting tips, helping with cleanup, and catching the last bus home to her small apartment where her mother would be waiting. But tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow always held the possibility of change, and Mai knew better than anyone that sometimes life's biggest transformations started in the most unexpected places, even in the midst of carrying plates and enduring whispered jokes. The Friday evening rush at Golden Plate was in full swing when everything changed. The restaurant hummed with chatter, clinking glasses, and the steady rhythm of footsteps as servers weaved between tables. Mai had been on her feet for 10 hours straight, but she moved with practiced grace, balancing a tray of appetizers in one hand while dodging a colleague rushing past with water pitchers. Private party of 12 just got seated in your section, Lynn, the hostess, warned as Mai passed the front desk. Corporate group from that new tech company downtown. May nodded, quickly reorganizing her mental schedule. Large groups were tricky. More pressure, more details to remember, but also potentially better tips for her mother's medical fund. The group sat at the restaurant's best table, their loud laughter carrying across the room. Designer suits, expensive watches, and the latest smartphones scattered across the white tablecloth told Mai everything she needed to know. She approached with her usual warm smile, notepad ready. "Welcome to Golden Plate. I'm Mie, and I'll be taking care of you this evening." She had barely finished her introduction when one of the men cut her off. "Finally. We've been waiting forever. Get us a round of your most expensive champagne. We're celebrating a billion-dollar merger." Mai efficiently took their complicated orders, each person requesting special modifications to their dishes. She repeated everything back perfectly, years of experience evident in her careful attention to detail. As she turned to leave, she heard one woman whisper, "Let's see if she can handle this without messing it up." The kitchen was slammed, but Chef Wong prioritized her orders. "Big spenders?" he asked, noticing her tension. Mai managed a small smile. "Big attitudes," she replied, loading up her tray with their champagne. Everything was going smoothly until it wasn't. The accident happened in slow motion. Another server bumped into a customer who stepped back suddenly, causing Mai to swerve to avoid them. One plate on her heavily loaded tray shifted slightly, causing a small drop of sauce to land on a woman's designer blazer. The reaction was immediate and explosive. "Do you have any idea how much this jacket costs?" the woman shrieked, standing up so quickly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. The entire restaurant fell silent. "More than you'll make in a month." Mai started to apologize, reaching for her napkin, but another executive had already pulled out their phone. "This is going on social media," she announced with a smirk. How not to serve customers 101. The phone's camera light felt like a spotlight as several others joined in, recording Mi's humiliation. "I'm very sorry about your jacket," Mai said steadily, maintaining her composure even as her hands trembled slightly. "Please allow me to have it professionally cleaned at our expense." But they weren't interested in solutions. The group had found their entertainment for the evening. "Maybe if you'd gone to college instead of settling for carrying plates, you'd understand the value of nice things," one man commented loudly, clearly playing to his audience of recording phones. What they didn't know was that Mi's business degree was hanging on her mother's wall at home, her mother's proudest possession. Mr. Chen, the restaurant owner, emerged from his office, drawn by the commotion. His face was grim as the group demanded compensation for the jacket, free meals, and Mi's immediate dismissal. In all her years of service, Mai had never seen such deliberate cruelty masked as justified outrage. "Perhaps it would be best if you took a few days off," Mr. Chen said quietly to Mai later that evening, his eyes apologetic but firm. "Until this social media situation dies down." The videos were already spreading, edited to make her look incompetent and unprofessional. As Mai hung up her apron that night, her coworkers avoided making eye contact, afraid the same thing could happen to them. Only Chef Wong spoke up, his voice gruff with emotion. "This isn't the end, kid. Sometimes life's worst moments lead to unexpected beginnings." Walking home in the cool evening air, Mai felt strangely calm. The humiliation still burned, but underneath it, something else was growing. A determination she hadn't felt since graduation. They thought they had broken her spirit, but instead, they had unknowingly lit a fire. Tomorrow would be different, not because she was giving up, but because she was finally ready to fight back. 3 days into her forced break, Mai found herself sitting in Sweet Drop Coffee, a once popular local chain that had become her refuge during difficult times. The coffee shop was nearly empty, a stark contrast to its bustling days just a year ago. She nursed a lukewarm cup of coffee, scrolling through job listings on her phone, trying to ignore the occasional ping of notifications about that viral video. "Sugar, you've been staring at that phone for 2 hours straight," called out the elderly barista, Mrs. Wu, sliding a fresh cup of coffee across her table. "This one's on the house." The kind gesture brought unexpected tears to May's eyes. As she wiped them away, the coffee shop's door chimed. A group of business people walked in, their conversation carrying across the quiet space. "Another location closing next month," one of them said, shaking his head. "Can't believe Sweet Drop is going under. They used to be everywhere." Mi's ears perked up despite herself. After years of serving corporate executives, she developed a habit of listening to business discussions. "The problem is leadership," another man added. "No innovation, no adaptation to changing customer preferences. They're still running this place like it's 1995. Looking around, Mai started noticing things she'd overlooked before. The worn-out menu boards still advertised the same drinks from when she'd first visited years ago. The Wi-Fi password was taped to the wall with yellowing Scotch tape. The coffee was good, but the paper cups were plain and forgettable, while other shops had beautiful, Instagram-worthy designs. She pulled out her notebook, the same one she'd used to jot down ideas during her restaurant breaks. Instead of job listings, she began making notes. The location was perfect, right between 3 office buildings. The rent must be reasonable, given the outdated interior. The staff was friendly, but needed training in modern coffee preparation techniques. "Mrs. Wu," Mai called out softly, "how long have you worked here?" The barista thought for a moment. "Coming up on 15 years, dear. Seen a lot of changes, though mostly for the worse lately." Over the next hour, Mrs. Wu shared stories about the coffee shop's glory days, and with each detail, Mi's notes grew more detailed. That evening, instead of going straight home, Mai visited every Sweet Drop location in the city. Each told the same story, great bones but stuck in the past. At the 3rd location, she overheard customers complaining about the limited non-dairy options. At the 5th, a group of students left because the shop didn't accept digital payments. Her mother was surprised to find her at the kitchen table at midnight, surrounded by papers covered in calculations. "What's all this?" she asked, setting down her evening medicine. "You should be resting." "Mom." Mai looked up, her eyes bright with purpose. "Remember how you always said every problem is an opportunity in disguise? I think I found mine." She explained her observations about Sweet Drop, her voice growing more animated with each detail. Her mother sat down, looking at the neat columns of numbers and ideas. "You were always good with business plans," she said softly. "Top of your class in university." She paused, then added, "But starting a business needs money, and with my medical bills." "I know," Mai replied, determination in her voice. "But I've been saving every tip since I started at Golden Plate. And look at these numbers. Sweet Drop's problem isn't that people don't want coffee. It's that they're not offering what people want today." She pulled out her phone and played a local news report about declining small businesses. "The whole chain might sell for less than we think. They're desperate. And Mom," she grabbed her mother's hand, "I'm tired of letting other people decide my worth." The next morning, Mai put on her best blazer, the one she'd worn to job interviews fresh out of college. She visited the public library, printing out market research reports and studying successful coffee shop turnaround stories. The viral video of her humiliation had shown her at her lowest, but it had also freed her from fear. After all, what was there left to lose? By sunset, she had a complete business proposal drafted. It wasn't perfect, but it was thorough, drawing on everything she'd learned from both her degree and her years of observing successful businesses from behind a serving tray. As she walked home, she passed a Sweet Drop location, its windows dirty and its sign fading. But where others saw decay, Mai now saw possibility. Sometimes, she realized, you had to hit bottom before you could see the way up. The early morning sun hadn't yet reached the windows of Sweet Drop Coffee when Mai settled into her usual corner table. Her notebook was already filled with a week's worth of observations, market research, and detailed plans. She had just enough money saved for a small business loan down payment, but the banks she'd visited yesterday had all said the same thing. Too risky, not enough collateral. The bell above the door chimed, and May glanced up out of habit. An older man in a simple gray sweater walked in, his shoes slightly scuffed, looking nothing like the polished executives she was used to serving. She recognized him immediately. He'd been a regular at Golden Plate, always ordering the simplest items on the menu and leaving generous tips. "Small black coffee, please," he told Mrs. Wu, then paused, looking around the nearly empty shop. What happened to this place? It used to be packed every morning. Times change. Mrs. Wu sighed, handling him a cup. "We're not as fancy as those new coffee shops." The man nodded thoughtfully, then turned and noticed Mai. Recognition flickered across his face. "You're the server from Golden Plate," he said, walking over. "I saw what happened. Terrible business, that." Mai felt her cheeks warm, but the man's voice held no pity, only quiet anger on her behalf. "Mind if I join you? I'm Mr. Liu." Mai hesitated, then gestured to the empty chair. As he sat, his eyes fell on her notebook. "Interesting diagrams you have there," he commented. "Market analysis." She instinctively moved to close the notebook, but something in his genuine interest made her pause. "Sweet Drop's customer demographics," she explained. "They're still targeting the same audience they had 20 years ago, but the neighborhood has completely changed." Mr. Liu's eyebrows rose slightly. He took a sip of his coffee, then asked, "And what would you do differently?" Maybe it was because she had nothing left to lose, or maybe it was the way he asked, like he actually wanted to know. But Mai found herself explaining everything. She talked about modernizing the payment systems, updating the menu to include trendy alternatives, redesigning the spaces to be more Instagram-friendly while keeping their cozy charm. "The bones of a great business are still here," she concluded, realizing she'd been talking for almost an hour. "They just need someone who understands both modern trends and traditional service values." Mr. Liu had stayed quiet, occasionally nodding, his coffee long finished. Finally, he reached into his worn leather bag and pulled out a business card. "I'm what you might call an angel investor," he said simply. "But I don't invest in businesses, I invest in people. I've been watching you at Golden Plate for months. The way you handled difficult customers, how you remembered everyone's preferences, how you stayed professional even when treated unfairly." He slid the card across the table. "That viral video. I saw something different in it. I saw someone who maintained their dignity in the face of cruelty. Someone who understood service isn't about being subservient. It's about seeing opportunities to make things better." Mi's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the card. "But my mother's medical bills, I can't risk." "Your mother raised someone who understands both business and people," Mr. Liu interrupted gently. "That's rare. I've been looking for a good investment opportunity for months. You've done more market research sitting in this coffee shop than most MBA graduates do in their first year of business." He stood up, straightening his simple sweater. "Study that proposal of yours one more time. Make it perfect. Meet me tomorrow, same time, same place. Bring 2 copies." He smiled, a grandfatherly twinkle in his eye. "And May, sometimes the universe has a strange way of turning ridicule into opportunity." After he left, Mai sat in stunned silence. Mrs. Wu shuffled over with a fresh cup of coffee. "I couldn't help overhearing," she said warmly. "You know, I always thought you were meant for more than just taking orders. The way you light up when talking about business, it reminds me of the original owner when she first opened this place." That night, May worked until dawn, refining her proposal. Her mother found her asleep at the kitchen table, her calculator still in hand, a small smile on her face. Through the window, the morning sun cast a golden glow over her papers, as if highlighting the path forward. Sometimes, she would later realize, your biggest supporters come disguised as simple coffee drinkers, and your biggest opportunities arrive wrapped in moments of despair. Dawn painted the sky in shades of pink as Mai balanced two jobs, her morning shifts at Golden Plate and her evenings overseeing renovations at the first Sweet Drop location. The purchase had gone through smoothly with Mr. Liu's backing, though his one condition had surprised her: keep the original staff. They just need someone who believes in them. Mrs. Wu had cried when Mai announced she was the new owner. "I knew you were special from the first day you walked in here with your notebook," she had said, hugging Mai tightly. The other staff members looked cautiously hopeful as Mai shared her vision for modernizing the cafe while keeping its warm, welcoming spirit. The transformation began slowly but steadily. New paint brightened the walls, local artists' work replaced faded posters, and modern lighting warmed the space. Mai spent her breaks between restaurant shifts training the staff on new equipment and recipes. She taught them about different coffee beans, milk alternatives, and the art of latte design, skills she'd researched extensively online. "Remember," she told them during a training session, "we're not just serving coffee. We're creating moments in people's days." She demonstrated how to make their new signature drink, a honey lavender latte with a delicate flower design on top. Every cup is a chance to make someone's day better. The irony wasn't lost on her when she spotted some familiar faces from Golden Plate visiting Sweet Drop one morning. The same executives who had mocked her were now standing in her cafe, admiring the changes without recognizing their former server and the confident owner directing staff from behind the counter. "This place has really turned around," one of them commented loudly, taking pictures of their artistically presented drinks. "Someone finally brought it into this century." Mi just smiled and continued training a new barista, remembering how they had once dismissed her as just a waitress. But running two jobs was taking its toll. Mai would return home late each night, exhausted but determined. Her mother worried, often waiting up with a warm cup of tea. "You're working too hard," she'd say, but her eyes shone with pride when she visited the cafe and saw her daughter in her element. The breaking point came during a particularly busy evening at Golden Plate. Mai was serving a table when she heard excited chatter about that amazing new coffee shop. Her customers were showing each other photos on social media. Photos of her cafe, her designs, her staff's creations. That's when she knew it was time. With trembling hands, but a steady voice, she gave Mr. Chen her 2 weeks' notice. Her former boss nodded understanding, having seen the changes in her. "You were always meant for more," he said quietly. "Chef Wang won't admit it, but he's already visited your cafe twice." Word spread quickly among the regular customers. The elderly couple from Table 7 brought her flowers on her last day. Even some of the difficult customers seemed to look at her differently when they learned she was leaving to run her own business. The real test came when the woman who had filmed the viral video walked into Sweet Drop, not recognizing Mai in her new role. She ordered their most complicated drink, probably ready to complain. Instead, she was so impressed that she posted a glowing review online. A different kind of viral moment, this time celebrating excellence rather than ridicule. Late that evening, after the last customer had left, Mai sat in her cafe, yes, her cafe, and looked around at what they had created. The warm lighting glowed softly on the polished counter, the air rich with the scent of fresh coffee and baked goods. Mrs. Wu was humming as she cleaned the espresso machine, teaching a new hire the proper technique. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Liu. Ready to look at the second location. Mai smiled, running her hand along the smooth counter. 6 months ago, she had been at her lowest point, humiliated in front of a restaurant full of people. Now she understood that sometimes life's hardest moments weren't endings at all. They were doorways leading to better beginnings. She opened her notebook, the same one that had started it all, and began sketching plans for the next Sweet Drop. This time, though, she wrote with the confidence of someone who had proven not just to others, but to herself, that success wasn't about where you started, but about having the courage to begin again. 1 year after opening her first Sweet Drop location, Mai was reviewing sales reports in her office when Mrs. Wu burst in, tablet in hand. "You need to see this," she said, her voice trembling. On the screen was the old viral video of Mai being humiliated at Golden Plate, but this time with a very different caption, "From ridiculed waitress to business success." The story behind Sweet Drop's amazing transformation. The local food blog had pieced together her story, comparing the viral video with Sweet Drop's remarkable turnaround. "Sometimes heroes don't wear capes," the article read. "Sometimes they wear aprons and prove that success is the best revenge." Mi's phone started buzzing with notifications. The story was spreading, but this time, people were sharing messages of support and admiration. Former customers from Golden Plate were posting their own memories of her kindness and professionalism. Even Chef Wong had commented, sharing how she would study business concepts during her breaks. "Look at the comments," Mrs. Wu pointed excitedly. People were sharing their own stories of workplace humiliation and how they'd overcome it. Sweet Drop's social media was flooded with messages from people saying they were visiting specifically to support a business that rose above negativity. That afternoon, a young journalist from the city's biggest news channel walked into the flagship store. "Would you be willing to share your story?" she asked, watching Mai train a new barista in their signature latte art. "People are inspired by how you turned ridicule into success." Mai hesitated, then nodded. "But I want to do the interview here," she said, "with my team working in the background. This isn't just my story. It's about everyone who helped build this place." The next morning, as they prepared for the interview, something unexpected happened. The woman who had filmed the original viral video walked in. The cafe fell silent. She looked different now, less polished, more human. She asked to speak with Mai privately. "I lost my job 3 months ago," she admitted, once they were seated in Mai's office. "That video, it haunts me. I've been on the other side now, being judged, feeling small. I came to apologize, but also..." She paused, pulling out her resume. "I wanted to ask if you're hiring." Mai studied the woman's face, remembering her own moments of humiliation and uncertainty. "We're always looking for people who understand the importance of treating others with respect," she said quietly. "Someone once gave me a second chance. Maybe it's time to pass that forward." The news interview aired that evening. Mai spoke about resilience, about finding opportunity in adversity, but mostly about kindness. "Success isn't just about profits," she explained as the camera panned across her bustling cafe. "It's about creating spaces where everyone feels valued." They showed clips of her staff, including her newest hire, the former executive, learning to make Sweet Drop's signature drinks. Mrs. Wu demonstrated their famous latte art, her hands steady and sure. Regular customers spoke about how the cafe had become their second home. "But the real story," Mai said, looking directly into the camera, "isn't about revenge or proving people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. About believing that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you treat others." The response was overwhelming. People drove from neighboring cities just to visit Sweet Drop. But what touched Mai most were the letters. Handwritten notes from people sharing how her story had given them courage to pursue their own dreams. That evening, after the crowds had gone, Mai found a small package on her desk. Inside was her old serving apron from Golden Plate, carefully framed, with a note from Mr. Liu. "Keep this, not as a reminder of bad times, but as proof that every ending can become a beautiful beginning." She hung it on the wall of her office, next to the business degree her mother had framed years ago. Through the window, she could see the sunset painting the sky in shades of promise, while her staff prepared for the next day. The viral video that had once brought tears of shame now brought tears of gratitude. Not for the success it had inadvertently led to, but for the strength it had helped her discover within herself. 3 years passed like pages turning in a book. Sweet Drop had grown from a struggling local chain to 15 thriving locations across the city, each with its own personality, but all sharing the same warm spirit. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the newest location, the one that meant the most to Mai. It stood exactly where Golden Plate Restaurant had once been. "Ready for the grand opening?" Mr. Liu asked, adjusting his now familiar gray sweater. He still visited every location regularly, more as a friend than an investor. May smoothed her apron. She still wore one, believing that good leaders work alongside their team, not above them. "Almost," she replied, watching her staff prepare for the day. The space had been completely transformed, yet somehow felt familiar. Where stiff white tablecloths once dominated, comfortable seating areas now invited people to stay and connect. The old kitchen where Chef Wong had once encouraged her had become a state-of-the-art coffee roasting area. Her mother sat in her favorite corner, proudly watching the final preparations. Thanks to the business's success, she'd received the best medical care available, and her health had improved significantly. "Look what you've built," she said softly as Mee joined her. "From one small notebook of dreams to all this." The line outside grew longer as opening time approached. Mai had insisted on serving customers herself today, wearing a name tag just like she used to. Her staff, now over 100 strong across all locations, included people from all walks of life, many with their own stories of starting over. Mrs. Wu, now the training manager for all new hires, stood ready with the scissors for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. "Remember when you first walked into my old shop?" she asked with a smile. "Who would have thought that scared but determined girl would end up owning the whole chain?" The doors opened, and the crowd flowed in. Among the first customers, May recognized faces from her waitressing days. The kind elderly couple who'd always brightened her shifts, Chef Wong proudly wearing a Sweet Drop t-shirt. Even some of the executives who'd once dismissed her. But now, there was no tension, no hierarchy, just people sharing a space designed to make everyone feel welcome. "What can I get for you today?" Mai asked each customer, her smile genuine, her hands still remembering the movements of service. Some recognized her from the news stories, others were new to her journey. To each, she gave the same attention and care she'd always believed everyone deserved. A young woman in a waitress uniform from a nearby restaurant came in during her break. "I saw your story," she said shyly. "I'm taking business classes online while serving tables. Sometimes it feels impossible." Mai reached under the counter and pulled out a notebook. She kept a stack of them now. "Here," she said, handing it to the woman. "Sometimes the biggest dreams start with the smallest notes. Just remember, no honest work is ever beneath you, and no goal is ever out of reach." As the day went on, Mai moved between making drinks, greeting customers, and supporting her staff. She'd instituted policies across all locations ensuring every employee received fair wages, educational opportunities, and most importantly, respect. The wall of her office displayed framed articles about Sweet Drop's innovative employee development program. But she was most proud of the thank you letters from team members who'd gone on to start their own businesses. Late that evening, after the last customer had left, May gathered her staff. They stood in a circle, experienced baristas, new trainees, former executives learning humility through service, and dreamers building their own futures. 3 years ago, she told them, "I thought losing my job was the end of my story. But life has a way of taking our biggest challenges and turning them into our greatest opportunities." She reached into her pocket and pulled out her original name tag from Golden Plate. "I keep this to remember where I started. But more importantly," she smiled at her team, "I keep it to remind myself why we're here. Every person who walks through our doors has their own dreams, their own struggles, their own story. Our job isn't just to serve coffee. It's to create a space where everyone feels valued enough to pursue those dreams." The setting sun cast long shadows through the windows, but inside Sweet Drop, the warm lights and gentle buzz of cleaning and restocking created a cozy atmosphere. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new customers, new stories. But tonight, in this space that had once witnessed her lowest moment, Mai felt nothing but gratitude. She had learned that success wasn't about proving critics wrong. It was about proving to yourself that kindness, determination, and dignity could transform not just a business, but a life.